In 2005, Rihanna, a 16-year-old from Barbados, sat in an office in New York and auditioned for the president of Def Jam. His name was Jay-Z, and the story goes that he would not let her leave the building until the contract was signed. 20 years later, she is worth a fortune, and most of it has nothing to do with music. It is built on a beauty empire, a company Forbes once valued at $2.8 billion. Now LVMH, the luxury group that owns half of that empire, wants out, and the firm that has moved to the front of the line to buy its stake is run by the same man who signed her at 16. So before the headlines call this a comeback, look at the paperwork. The question is not what she is worth. It is who ends up owning the other half of everything she built. Here is the number that started all of this. In 2021, Forbes valued that beauty company at $2.8 billion. 4 years later, when the actual owners went looking for a buyer, the price the market came back with was somewhere between 1 and 2 billion, not 2.8. In the low case, as little as half. That gap between what the brand was said to be worth and what someone will actually pay for it is the whole story. And once we trace where that gap came from, the version everyone repeated for years stops holding together. Start with what the brand actually is, because the success is real. Fenty Beauty launched in September 2017, and it did something the beauty industry had somehow avoided for decades. It sold foundation in 40 shades on day one, the deep tones included, the ones every other brand had treated as an afterthought. To understand why that landed so hard, picture what the makeup counter looked like before. A woman with dark skin could walk in, face a wall of foundations, and not find a single one that matched her. The industry had quietly decided that customer was not worth the shelf space. She proved the opposite. The reaction was immediate. By some estimates, the brand did around $100 million in sales in its first 40 days. In its first full year, it reportedly pulled in more than $550 million. The industry even gave the effect a name. They called it the Fenty effect, and every major competitor scrambled to widen their own shade ranges to catch up. Foundation, the least glamorous product in all of makeup, became the thing that built the empire, because she sold it to the people everyone else had ignored. And the machine underneath was tidy. The brand sold through Sephora, which LVMH also owns, so the same conglomerate that co-owned Fenty Beauty also controlled the shelves it sat on. It was a closed loop, and for a while it printed money. She understood exactly how valuable her own face was to all of it. When she headlined the Super Bowl halftime show in 2023 in front of more than 100 million viewers, she stopped mid-performance to touch up her makeup on camera with one of her own products. The biggest stage on television, and she turned a few seconds of it into an ad for the brand. That was the whole pattern. The music brought her the audience, and the audience bought the makeup. But here is the part that matters for the money, and it is the part that usually gets skipped. She did not own the brand alone. Fenty Beauty was a joint venture from the very start. She built it with LVMH, the French conglomerate behind Louis Vuitton, Dior, and Sephora. The deal ran through an LVMH beauty incubator called Kendo Brands, and the ownership was split straight down the middle. She held 50% through a holding company reported to be named Rorage Trade, LLC. LVMH held the other 50%. That structure is what people praised. She held real equity in a real company, half of it hers, the kind of ownership most celebrities in her position never come close to. Her half could not simply be taken away by a brand that lost interest. And for years, that was the proof she had done it the right way. So in August 2021, Forbes put her on its cover and made it official. They called her a billionaire with an estimated net worth of $1.7 billion. The cover made her the wealthiest female musician in the world, and by the magazine's own count, the second richest woman in all of American entertainment, behind only Oprah Winfrey. And they were clear about where the money came from. It was not her music. By Forbes' own math, roughly $1.4 billion of that fortune came from her stake in the beauty company, which they valued at $2.8 billion. Another slice came from her lingerie brand. The music, the thing that made her famous in the first place, was almost a rounding error next to the makeup. Now sit with that Forbes number for a second, because everything hinges on it. That $2.8 billion valuation was an estimate. It was not a price anyone had paid. Nobody had bought the company at that number, and nobody had sold it at that number. It was Forbes doing what Forbes does, taking a private company's reported revenue and applying a multiple to guess what it might be worth. On paper, it made her a billionaire. On paper. That one distinction is about to matter more than anything else in this story. Because the brand did not keep climbing. It plateaued. In that first full year, it was doing more than $550 million. According to Reuters, by 2024, the brand generated around $450 million in net sales. The number had gone down, and she had company at the top now, all of it hungry. Selena Gomez's Rare Beauty and Lady Gaga's House Labs had arrived and were pulling attention and shelf space. A push into China, the market every beauty brand chases, reportedly struggled. Fenty was no longer the only inclusive option on the wall. It was one of many. The advantage of being first had worn off, because by the mid-2020s, the whole industry had copied the idea, several rivals at lower prices. And in the beauty world, a brand that stops growing is a brand investors start marking down. Forbes noticed. In its 2025 ranking, the same magazine that had crowned her quietly revised her net worth, cutting it by roughly $400 million, back toward $1 billion. The reasons they gave were the flat beauty sales and trouble at the lingerie brand, where the chief executive had just left to go run Victoria's Secret. Read that again. The person hired to run her lingerie company left to take the top job at the exact competitor that company had been built to beat. And the lingerie brand tells you something about how these celebrity valuations really work. At its peak, that company was valued at around $1 billion, and there was talk of taking it public at a valuation as high as $3 billion. Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley were reportedly involved. That IPO never happened. What did happen was less glamorous. In 2022, the brand quietly settled with a group of California prosecutors for $1.2 million over accusations that its membership program had been signing customers up for a recurring monthly charge without making the terms clear. So the same brand that helped Forbes call her a billionaire was, at the same time, paying to settle a complaint about surprise auto billing. It was not the kind of detail that makes it into a billionaire cover story. And the biggest problem of all was not even hers. It belonged to her partner. LVMH, the luxury giant holding the remaining half of the empire, was having its worst stretch in years. Its total revenue for 2025 came in around 80 billion euros, down about 5% on the year. Its perfumes and cosmetics division, the one Fenty Beauty sits inside, was reported to be down. Its stock had dropped by roughly 23%, and the group's response was the largest clean-out of brands in its roughly 40-year history. For a company that had spent decades only ever buying brands, deciding to sell them was a signal in itself. It agreed to sell Marc Jacobs to a brand management company. Makeup Forever and the skincare label Fresh were reportedly put under review. And on that list of assets LVMH wanted off its books sat its 50% of Fenty Beauty. So in October 2025, the reporting broke. According to Reuters, LVMH had hired the investment bank Evercore to find a buyer for its half of the company. This is the moment the paper billionaire number collided with reality. When you actually put a company up for sale, you stop guessing what it is worth, and you start finding out what someone will pay. And the range that came back was not 2.8 billion. It was 1 to 2 billion for the whole business. One analysis from JP Morgan, reported by the Financial Times, put the range at roughly 1.5 to 2.5 billion euros. Either way, the number that had made her a billionaire had been cut, and in the low case, it had been cut clean in half. For LVMH, this was less about Fenty and more about focus. The group was pouring its energy into its biggest engines, Louis Vuitton, Dior, and Sephora, and raising cash along the way. A celebrity beauty brand it co-owned but no longer treated as essential was exactly the kind of thing it wanted to turn back into money. Now here is the mechanism almost nobody explains, and it is the reason this was never really a story about a valuation at all. When you own 50% of a company, you own half the upside, but you also do not control the other half. LVMH can sell its stake to whoever it wants. She does not get to veto the buyer just because her name is on the door. And whoever writes that check for LVMH's half does not become a silent investor sitting quietly in the background. They become her partner. They sit in the boardroom. They get a real say in the company she built, the one that carries her name and her face. She owns half of it, and she does not get to choose who controls the rest. That is the true cost of the 50-50 deal that made her rich, and it had been hiding in plain sight the entire time. And the kind of buyer matters enormously, because a private equity firm does not buy a brand to admire it. It buys to grow the numbers and sell again, usually within a handful of years. New owners can push a brand down market, cut costs, change the formulas, chase volume, or line the whole thing up for another sale to someone bigger. Whoever buys LVMH's half is not just parking money. They are setting the direction of the next chapter, and she is along for whatever ride they choose. And there is a personal question buried inside the financial one. She is not simply the name on the box. She is the creative force, the reason the brand means anything at all. A new owner chasing a quick return could lean on her far harder to sell it, or could push the whole brand somewhere she never wanted it to go, toward cheaper products and faster launches. The one thing she cannot do, if she does not control that other half, is tell them no. If you want the real numbers behind the famous ones, take 1 second to subscribe and tap the like button. It tells the algorithm to show this to more people who trace the money instead of trusting the headline. Now, back to the buyer. Because the identity of that buyer is where this stops being an ordinary business story and turns into something stranger. In June 2026, the beauty trade publication Beauty Independent reported that one firm had moved to the front of the line for LVMH's stake. The frontrunner was not L'Oreal, and it was not another beauty conglomerate. It was an investment firm co-founded by Jay-Z, called MarcyPen Capital Partners. Think about what that would actually mean. If the deal goes through, the rapper's firm would own the half of the beauty empire that LVMH is selling. He would become her business partner in the company that carries her name. And to see why that is not random, you have to follow the money backward, because these two have been financially tied together far longer than most people realize. The firm itself is new. It was formed in 2024, out of a merger between his earlier venture fund and another investment firm, and it now manages around $1.1 billion. It is run day to day by a former financial advisor to President Obama, and people close to the fund have compared its ambitions to TSG Consumer, one of the big consumer-focused private equity firms, the kind that turns brands into billion-dollar exits. This is a serious buyer with serious money, and it has spent the last 2 years quietly building a real portfolio across beauty and consumer goods, from the makeup brand Merit to the wellness company Rihanna. But its predecessor fund had already put money into her world. When her lingerie brand raised that $125 million round in early 2022, his firm was one of the investors at the table. It had backed her in an earlier round too, back in 2019. So the firm now circling half her beauty empire is not a stranger to her business. It has been an investor in it for years. Now go all the way back to that office in 2005. She was 16 years old. The rapper was the newly installed president of Def Jam, and by his own account, they did not let her leave the building until the contract was signed. She has told the story herself that they kept her there until 3 in the morning. The way she has described it, the label made the stakes very clear that night. She has recalled being told there were only 2 ways she could leave: through the door with the deal signed, or another way entirely, and they were on a high floor of the building. She has always framed it as a joke, but the point of the joke was not exactly subtle. They were not going to let her walk out of there unsigned. And there is a second detail in that story almost nobody connects. The person who first carried her demo tape to Jay-Z, the executive who set up that audition in the first place, was a young Def Jam staffer named Jay Brown. 2 decades later, that same executive is a co-founder of MarcyPen, the very firm now first in line to buy half of her empire. The 2 men who signed a teenager in that office in 2005 are the same 2 men whose fund is now bidding on what that teenager built. This is not a coincidence. It is the same relationship, 20 years on, moving from a record contract to a billion-dollar balance sheet. Now, a few honest caveats, because this is exactly where the drama channels go off the rails, and we are not going to. Nothing has been signed. As of now, the reporting says the rapper's firm is the frontrunner, and in talks, not that a deal is finished. The firm has declined to comment. LVMH has not confirmed any buyer. This could still fall apart, and another bidder could still walk in. We are telling you where the paperwork stands, not writing an ending that has not happened yet. There is also one crucial thing nobody outside the deal actually knows. We do not know whether she holds the contractual right to approve or block the sale of LVMH's half. Some coverage has floated that she might have a right of first refusal, a clause that would let her match any offer and simply buy the stake herself. But the terms of that original partnership agreement are private. Nobody who has reported on this has seen them. So anyone telling you for certain that she is trapped, or telling you for certain that she is in full control, is guessing. There is one more thing worth sitting with. Fenty Beauty became a landmark because it served the customers the industry had ignored, women of color first in line. If this deal closes, half of that brand would pass from a French luxury house to a black-owned investment firm. Whatever you make of the money, that is a genuinely different kind of owner for a brand built on that particular promise. But step back from the specifics, because this is the part that outlasts the headline. She did everything the smart way. She negotiated for real ownership, a genuine equity stake, and she helped build the company from the ground up. She held half of it in her own name. And even that was not enough to control what happened to it, because the other half was always someone else's to sell whenever they chose. For years, people held her up as the celebrity who finally beat the system by owning a real piece of it. The filings show the thing the celebration left out. A piece that big still comes with a partner, and that partner can decide, entirely on their own schedule, to hand your empire to somebody new. This is the quiet catch buried inside almost every celebrity business deal. The famous founder is the reason the brand exists at all. But the real money usually comes from partners. and those partners answer to their own math. A founder's legacy is not part of the calculation. She played this about as well as any artist ever has, and it still led her right here. Forbes gave her a number. When this sale finally closes, the market will hand the world the real one. And in the end, the partner was always the price. If you want to see the other half of that playbook, the celebrities who took the paycheck instead of the equity and watched the company they fronted get sold out from under them, that story is on the screen right now.